Welcome back to Decode Station. I'm Sarah, and today we're decoding a crime that was hidden in plain sight in every car's gas tank.
And when we say crime, we aren't talking about, a simple bank robbery or something. This was a slow-motion catastrophe.
Right.
A single decision made in a boardroom that literally changed the atmosphere of our planet and the very chemistry of the human brain.
I have to say, going through the research for this deep dive, I genuinely had to stop and check the sources multiple times.
I believe it.
It reads like this massive conspiracy theory, the kind you'd find in some weird corner of the internet, but it's not. It's all documented history.
That's the most terrifying part. It was a conspiracy, but it was all done out in the open.
Yeah.
And it really centers around one man, though. Well, he certainly didn't act alone.
Yeah.
His name was Thomas Midgley Jr.
Midgley, right. In engineering textbooks, he's kind of hailed as this tragic genius, isn't he? The guy with hundreds of patents who solved these huge problems.
Oh, he was brilliant. Absolutely. But in the grand scope of environmental history, he's arguably one of the most destructive single organisms to ever exist on Earth.
Wow.
We're looking at a man who didn't just invent a product. He engineered a delivery system for a malicious poison, knew it was a poison, and then spent decades convincing the world it was a miracle. He is the architect of what we call the ethyl lie.
The ethyl lie. Okay, let's unpack that, because when I hear ethyl, I just think of, old gas pumps.
Sure.
Maybe a brand name from the 50s. It sounds so harmless, friendly even.
And that was exactly the point. That was the design. But to understand the lie, we have to go back to the problem they were trying to solve in 1921.
Okay.
General Motors had a massive issue. The car industry was about to explode, but all the engines were limited by knocking.
Right, then knock. And for anyone listening who isn't a mechanic, this isn't just an annoying sound, right? It's a real physics problem.
It's a physics problem, exactly. It's premature detonation. In an engine, you want the fuel to burn in a smooth, controlled wave. But if you tried to make engines more powerful, by increasing the compression, the gas would just explode too early.
It would knock or ping.
Exactly. And it destroyed engines. It basically put a cap on how powerful you could make a car.
So GM is sitting on this potential gold mine of high-performance cars, but they can't build them. The gas just explodes too fast.
Precisely. So they tasked Thomas Midgley Jr. to find a chemical additive to slow down that burn. And he tried. He tried everything. The research notes are wild.
Like what?
He tested iodine, camphor. At one point, he even tested melted butter.
Melted butter? Seriously? That sounds smelly.
He was desperate. But eventually, he lands on this compound called tetraethyl lead, TEL.
Okay.
And chemically, it worked like magic. A tiny amount completely eliminated the knock. It let the fuel burn slow and even. The engine just purred.
So from a purely engineering standpoint, he solved it. He's the hero of the day.
If you completely ignore biology, yes. But here's the problem. There was a very, very good reason people didn't put lead in things.
It's poison.
It's an ancient poison.
Yeah.
The Romans knew it was dangerous. They saw what it did to the miners. By 1921, it was just established scientific fact that lead is a potent neurotoxin. It doesn't just make you sick, it destroys your nervous system.
So Midgley finds this miracle cure for the engine, but the cure is, it's death.
Essentially. And this is where the story shifts from, scientific discovery to corporate conspiracy. Midgley and the executives at GM and Standard Oil knew lead was toxic. We have letters where Midgley himself admits the danger.
What?
But it was cheap. And crucially, they could patent it. You see, ethanol, just alcohol, could have also fixed the knock.
Right.
But you can't patent alcohol. Anyone can make it. You can patent tetraethyl lead.
So they chose the poison because they could own it. That is just so dark. But they couldn't just sell lead gas to people, surely.
And that is the brilliance and the horror of the ethyl lie.
They formed a new company.
The Ethyl Corporation.
Yeah.
The Ethyl Corporation. And there was a specific written executive order given. It's in the documents. The order was to never, under any circumstances, use the word lead.
Wait, say that again?
Never use the word lead. Not in advertising, not on labels, not in any public statement.
They just deleted the word.
They erased it. They took tetraethyl lead, and they sold it to the world simply as ethyl.
That is, the audacity of that is just staggering. Here, buy this ethyl gas. It's a miracle. And the whole time, it's basically neurotoxin juice.
Precisely. They marketed it as liquid progress, a friendly brand, bright colors, smiling attendants. But here's the truly chilling part. While the billboards were promising a smoother ride, the internal memos were telling a very different story.
What were they saying?
The scientists inside the company, they weren't calling it a miracle. Privately, they referred to TEL as a malicious poison.
Malicious poison. Wow, that's not a phrase you use for something you think is just a little bit risky.
No.
That's a phrase you use for a weapon.
It implies intent, or in the very least, a reckless disregard for what's going to happen. They knew. And that disconnect between the public ethyl and the private lead is the foundation for everything that happens next.
Yeah.
Because you can't hide the nature of a chemical forever. Eventually, biology takes over.
And that brings us to the part of the research that honestly gave me chills. The incident in New Jersey. The House of Butterflies.
The Deepwater Refinery. It was late 1924. Standard Oil set up a refinery there to mass produce this new ethyl fluid.
Okay.
And you have to picture the scene. This is not a modern lab with fume hoods and safety gear. This is a factory floor. Hot, poorly ventilated, and just filled with fumes.
And I'm guessing since they were rushing this miracle to market, the safety standards were
practically non-existent. Worse than that, the workers were handling this concentrated fluid all day. Now, this is crucial to understand about the chemistry. Tetraethyl lead is fat-soluble.
Fat-soluble? Okay, break that down for me. Why is that so much worse than other poisons?
Well, it means it doesn't just stay in your lungs or your blood. It dissolves into fats. And what is the human brain largely made of?
Fat.
Fat. So when you inhale these fumes, or even just get the liquid on your skin, it bypasses the body's normal defenses and goes straight into your brain tissue. Instantly, it attacks the central nervous system.
Oh, God. So it's literally soaking into their brains while they work.
Exactly. So the workers at Deepwater, they started to change. At first, it was just tremors, irritability, memory loss. But then the hallucinations started.
Yeah.
And they were specific.
The insects.
Yes, the insects. This is the detail that just haunts me. The men working on that line began to believe they were covered in bugs. Not just seeing them, feeling them.
Ugh, my skin is crawling just hearing you say that.
They were in a state of acute lead encephalopathy. Their brains were literally swelling inside their skulls. They'd stop working and just start frantically brushing their arms, their chests, their legs, trying to brush off these invisible swarms of insects that they believed were devouring them.
And that's where the nickname came from.
The House of Butterflies.
That is the most beautiful and horrifying name for a death trap I've ever heard.
It's poetic in the absolute darkest way. The other workers would look at these men, flapping their arms, brushing at the air, and they would say they were in the House of Butterflies. But it wasn't a joke. It was the prelude to death.
How bad did it get?
Within just a few days of the severe symptoms starting, 5 men died. And they didn't just pass away peacefully. They died in violent psychotic states, screaming, hallucinating. They needed straitjackets because their bodies were thrashing so violently.
My God.
And another 35 were hospitalized, many with permanent neurological damage.
5 dead, 35 hospitalized. In a few days. That should have been the end of it, right? I mean, a factory kills 5 people in a week because the product makes them hallucinate bugs. You shut it down, you ban it.
You would think so. But remember, this is the Ethyl Corporation. They had a brand to protect.
So what did they say? I mean, how do you possibly explain away the House of Butterflies?
You blame the victims. The company released an official statement, and this is on record, you could look it up, claiming that the men died because they had worked too hard.
Worked too hard? They literally said that.
They said the men were exhausted. And, they added, the men clearly had poor hygiene. They implied that if these workers had just washed their hands better or weren't so careless, they'd be fine. They framed it as a personal failure, not a product failure.
That makes my blood boil. Oh, you're hallucinating invisible spiders and dying in a straitjacket. You probably just need a shower.
It's gaslighting on an industrial scale. But the press wasn't entirely buying it. The bodies were piling up. There was a public outcry. People were starting to ask, is this new gas dangerous?
Oh, the secret was leaking out.
It was. Headlines started calling it loony gas. The ethyl mask was slipping. And this brings us to Thomas Midgley's greatest performance. He knew he had to save the product. He had to prove it was safe. So on October 30, 1924, he calls a press conference.
I read about this. This is the stunt. It feels like something a magician would do, not a scientist.
It is pure theater. The reporters are all gathered. The mood is tense. Midgley walks in looking confident, and he has a flask of pure tetraethyl lead with him.
The concentrated stuff, the exact fluid that killed the men in New Jersey.
The very same.
Yeah.
And right there, in front of all the cameras and journalists, he pours the liquid all over his hands. He washes his hands in it.
No way.
And he doesn't stop there. He then lifts the flask to his nose and inhales the fumes. deeply for 60 seconds.
60 seconds. That is an eternity to be sniffing poison.
He puts the flask down, dries his hands with a handkerchief, and smiles at the reporters. He tells them, I could do this every day without any harm whatsoever.
Wow, I mean, that is convincing. If the inventor himself is bathing in it, it must be safe, right? That just kills the argument dead.
That was the logic. It shut the critics up. It calmed the panic. It let the Ethyl Corporation get back to business. But here is the twist. The thing that makes this truly diabolical.
He was lying.
Oh, he was lying. But it's so much worse than that. He wasn't just lying about the safety of the chemical. He was lying about his own condition. At the very moment he was washing his hands in that poison, Thomas Midgley was dying of lead poisoning.
Wait, what? He already had it.
He was riddled with it. He had spent the previous months down in Florida, not on vacation, but trying to recover from severe lead exposure. His body temperature was fluctuating. His lead levels were through the roof. He was likely suffering from the same tremors and irritability as the factory workers.
So he stood there, already poisoned, inhaling more poison just to protect the stock price.
He sacrificed his own body to sell the lie. It's almost Shakespearean. He poisoned himself to ensure that he could poison the world.
And it worked.
It worked perfectly. But they needed more than just a stunt. They needed official cover. And this is where the Bureau of Mines comes in.
The government regulators.
Right. You'd expect them to do an independent study. And they did conduct a study. But the Ethyl Corporation offered to fund it.
Oh, I see where this is going.
It gets darker. In the contract with the Bureau of Mines, Ethyl Corporation included a clause that gave them veto power over the results.
You're kidding.
They explicitly stated that the Bureau could not publish any findings without the company's permission.
That's not a study. That's a marketing brochure. They just bought the regulator.
They bought the science. The final report concluded there were no grounds for prohibiting the use of ethyl gasoline. Any scientist who disagreed was silenced or marginalized.
So the House of Butterflies was just swept under the rug, Midgley's stunt worked, the government signed off, and leaded gas just became the standard.
For 50 years, half a century. Think about that delay. Because of that press conference and because of that corrupt study, we pumped lead into the atmosphere from the 1920s all the way until the ban started slowly in the 70s and 80s.
And this is where the story gets, well, so much bigger. Because up until now, we've been talking about factory workers, but you're saying this affected everyone.
Everyone. You,
Yeah.
me, our parents, our grandparents. There isn't a person on Earth today who doesn't have a higher concentration of lead in their bones and blood than their ancestors did before 1921.
How does that happen, though? It's just gas, right? It burns up in the engine.
Matter doesn't disappear. It just changes form. When you burn leaded gas, the lead comes out the tailpipe as microscopic dust, fine particles that just hang in the air.
So we breathe it in every time a car drove by.
We breathe it in, but it also settles. It settles on the grass, on playgrounds, in the soil. Children playing outside in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, they were inhaling lead dust, getting it on their hands, then putting their hands in their mouths.
And since it's a neurotoxin.
Since it's a neurotoxin that specifically attacks the developing brain, the consequences were catastrophic.
Yeah.
But they were silent. You don't drop dead instantly like the man at Deepwater. It's subtle. It just changes who you are.
This brings us to the lead crime hypothesis. This was a part of the deep dive where I literally had to put my tablet down and just stare at the wall for a minute.
It's a profound realization. To understand it, you have to look at what lead actually does to the brain. We now know that lead specifically damages the prefrontal cortex.
That's the executive center, right? The part of the brain that controls impulses, the part that says, hey, don't punch that guy or don't steal that car.
Exactly. It regulates aggression, emotional control, decision-making. If you damage the prefrontal cortex in a young child, that child is statistically far more likely to struggle with impulse control as an adult. They're more prone to violent outbursts. They have a harder time weighing consequences.
So the hypothesis is that all this lead gas literally caused a crime wave.
The data is.
Yeah.
It's startlingly perfect. It's one of the most robust correlations in all of social science. If you look at a graph of leaded gasoline usage, it goes up at peaks and then it drops when it was banned. Now, if you take a graph of violent crime, assault, murder, robbery, and you shift it forward by about 20 to 23 years.
23 years. The time it takes for a poisoned baby to grow up into a violent young man.
The two curves match almost perfectly. As lead use skyrocketed in the 40s and 50s, 20 years later, in the 60s and 70s, violent crime skyrocketed. When we finally started banning lead in the 70s, 20 years later, in the 90s, crime rates began to plummet.
That That's insane. You're telling me the massive crime waves of the 80s and early 90s, the stuff we all grew up hearing about on the news, the super predator theories, that might have just been caused by car exhaust from when those criminals were toddlers.
It's highly likely. And it holds up internationally. Countries that banned lead later saw their crime drops happen later. It's a global phenomenon. We poisoned the brains of entire generations. We made them more aggressive, less able to control themselves.
It makes you wonder how much of history, how many riots, how many murders were just lead poisoning.
It completely reframes the entire 20th century. We talk about moral decay or social policies causing crime. But what if the biggest driver was just a molecule in the air?
And it wasn't just crime. The research mentioned intelligence, too.
The IQ drop, yes.
Yeah.
This is the other side of that same coin.
We literally made the entire world stupider.
Yes. Atmospheric lead exposure is estimated to have caused a permanent drop in average global IQ levels. Lead interferes with synaptic pruning, with neural connections.
By how much? Are we talking a point or two?
It's hard to put an exact number on it globally, but one study from Duke suggested that for Americans born between the late 60s and early 80s, the collective loss was over 800 million IQ points.
800 million points.
Think about what that means.
Right.
The inventions that were never made, the problems that weren't solved, the art that was never created. Because we dampened the cognitive potential of humanity just to stop an engine from knocking.
And to protect a brand, to protect Ethyl.
To protect Ethyl.
It's so frustrating because it feels like we were robbed. We were robbed of safety, robbed of IQ points, and robbed of the truth for 50 years.
And the tragedy is we can't just scrub it away. Lead is an element. It doesn't decay. The lead dust that settled in the soil in 1950 is still there. If you live in a city near a busy road, that soil likely still has high lead levels. It's a toxic legacy that will outlive all of us.
It really changes how you look at the 20th century. You think of it as this time of explosive progress, cars, planes, technology, but there was this invisible heavy tax we were all paying the whole time.
Progress often has a shadow. In this case, the shadow was literal dust.
So Midgley dies eventually. Ironically, he was strangled by one of his own inventions, wasn't he?
He was, yes. Later in life, he contracted polio. He designed this complex system of ropes and pulleys to help lift himself out of bed, and one morning he got entangled in the ropes and was strangled.
A tragic, strange end. But the damage he did, that outlived him by eons.
It did. And, he didn't stop at lead. He also invented Freon, CFCs.
Wait, the stuff that put a hole in the ozone layer?
The very same. He's the only man in history to have arguably caused global damage to the atmosphere with two completely different compounds.
That is a resume of destruction that is just hard to wrap your head around. It's a heavy episode today.
It is, but it's a necessary one. We need to understand that science and marketing are often at war. And in the case of the Ethyl Lie, marketing won for a very, very long time.
It makes you skeptical.
It should.
Well, that's about all the time we have, but before we go, I'm just stuck on that image of the House of Butterflies, those poor men. It's a reminder that safety regulations aren't just red tape. They're written in blood.
They usually are.
Yeah.
And I want to leave the listener with one thought. We look back at the 1920s and we think, how could they be so easily fooled? How could they let a company just delete the word lead and accept it?
Yeah, it seems so obvious to us now. Hey, don't drink the neurotoxin.
Right. But consider this. The Ethyl Corporation hid a neurotoxin behind a friendly name for 50 years. They normalized a miracle that was slowly poisoning us. So the question we have to ask ourselves today is, what is our ethyl? What miracle product are we all using right now, blindly, that 50 years from now, people will look back on and say, I can't believe they didn't know?
That is a terrifying thought to end on. Thanks for ruining my sleep tonight.
Anytime.
And thank you for listening to Decode Station. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.